Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. I hope you're all having a good week. We've got a bit of a different video for you today. I wanted to kind of put the min-maxing back in the channel. It's been a bit since I kind of talked about some more general Fab stuff, not just focused on specific heroes that I'm interested in. So I wanted to go through today actually how I use stats in Fab. So I'm going to be focused mainly on Fablazing, but I'm also going to talk about Fabry stats and why I think stats are actually useful. A lot of people like to discount Talishar stats or online stats and just look at tournaments, but I think both in combination can give you a really strong idea of what the meta is going to look like, what card choices people are going to bring, what your matchup spread is going to look like, tech cards, that type of thing. So there's a lot to cover here, and hopefully I can do it justice and also show maybe how to use some of these tools if you're not familiar with them. So the first thing I'm going to go through is a bit of Fablazing. I am a Fablazing member, but I am also going to show some of the free stuff and how you can get the most of the tool. And then if you really like the features, you can upgrade at your leisure. I'm not personally sponsored by them, but my team is. I just think they're a great site, and I want to get more share of what you can do on this site. And I think people are maybe only loosely familiar with some of the stats available or some of the features, or maybe they don't have as in-depth knowledge on how to use the site. So when you go to Fablazing, a lot of people are really familiar with some of the initial available tools. So you've got the meta share for last couple days in Talishar. You can see what people are playing. Thanks to everyone for playing lots of Puffin games, getting her up there. But you can also see some of their top win rates or top matchups that they're facing. You'll see most people face Marionette as the most popular matchup. So if we click into hero, this will bring us to the heroes page. You can see just their cards, their average frequency, how many copies people are playing. If you're a premium member, you can also see more and see a total copy list of every card that people might be running. These go down into really low frequencies, and some of these you have to take it with a grain of salt because the play rate is going to be super low, so they're not going to have a ton of stats on them. Also in the heroes page, you can look at recent matches and what people were boarding. So this was a recent match versus a Bolton, and you can see the exact board that they brought. Every card in, same thing with any other of these other matches, right? And go in depth there. The next tab is tournament deck lists. A lot of times these aren't super up to date anymore because LSS stopped publishing the tournament deck lists as widely. It used to be that they would publish all of the tournament deck lists after an event, and I used to go through and look at the win rate for specific archetypes of heroes in paper events, but there hasn't really been as much availability of that. I assume it's because LSS didn't want people to do exactly what I was doing, but that's okay. You can still see recent results and runs here or there as well. You can also pull up the matchup spread, and this will give you the last 30 days of online games. You can also change it to the last 30 days of paper games and win rates into specific heroes. It also gives you your sample sizes, so there's only 50 Olympia games, right? This is not a huge sample size, but for things like Jarl, this is a large sample size and something that I would take pretty strongly into consideration, right? Maybe it's not 100% indicative of the matchup if you have XYZ tech card that you think people aren't running or a way to play the matchup, but these are not to be discounted, right? And then finally, there's an articles and guides section, as well as any VODs that you might be looking for. These aren't always super accurate. I'm not sure what Fablazing's tracking is for this, especially for the VODs. I think this is just all Talishar VODs that were posted lately, so it might not be necessarily indicative of the exact hero you're looking for. But I think the way that it tracks it is it looks for matches played. So in this stream, I assume that aggro played into a Marionette at some point. I don't know how this is exactly tracked, and I haven't gone through all the videos to see if they're accurate, but I'm going to assume it's decently accurate. But you can also change this to different formats. So this was just the CC stats. So we can go to like Blitz and look at the deck lists, or like LL, and select whatever hero you're looking for. So the Heroes tab is probably the most familiar tool that people use, mostly because it links directly from the meta. So when you're like looking at your CC heroes, you're like, oh, I wonder how Jarl's doing. You click in and you view them. But Fablazing has several other tools that I think are actually more helpful than just looking at what cards are ran in a hero and what their matchup spread is like. So firstly is a matchup analysis. Matchup analysis is an insane tool, and a lot of the features of this are free to use. So what you can do is you can go to like CC. I can look at, let's look at my girl Puffin, and let's look at the Marionette matchup. If you want to look at all matchups, that is a premium feature, but let's say I just want to look at the Marionette matchup for the last 14 days. I can analyze the matchup, and I can scroll down and I can see, okay, here is the win rate when I'm on 3 copies of Cotton Machine. Here is the win rate of Tipple. Obviously, there's only 2 copies. Sometimes you're like getting some noisy, weird cards in, right? Like 2 games with Ravenous Rabble, 2 games with Ataya, right? All these like low percent cards. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll go into additional features. This just makes it easier for me. Again, this is a premium feature, but it is not necessary to get the information you're looking for. I just think it makes it easier to ignore cards. So I can exclude all the cards that are 5% or less played, and then just look at the more popular options into Marionette. And I can look and I can see, okay, we see, E-Strike seems to be doing well into Marionette, defense reactions, the Zeppelins, maybe CNC is kind of good. I can look through and I can see how cards are performing in certain matchups. Let's see what cards are bad, right? Conquer the High Seas, doing very badly. Riches, doing very badly. Pummel, doing very badly, right? Shelter, funnily enough, not doing super hot. So these aren't a huge sample size. You'll see over here the number of games. So like 50 games is not a big sample size. I would not take these stats as like definitive unless you have a like over 100 game sample size, but it just gives you some markers, right? With a hero like Puffin, especially when most of the games are being played in open format, you're not going to get the stats you want into heroes that aren't also playing in open format. So like Marionette players, for example, aren't really playing in open format right now. So most of the games that you're going to get that are not open format, so you'll see I wasn't including them, are going to be with old Puffin lists, and they might not be it. So if I want to include the open format matches, I can look there and see how the matchup changes. I should have a lot more data here. Yeah, so I've got 160 games now, and the count for a lot of these cards went up by like 20 or 30. So this gives me a better idea of how the matchup looks. Another thing you can do is actually filter for specific cards in your deck list. With this, again, this is like premium, it just makes it easier for me. So like if I want to look for when you're specifically running Gear Turner, which means to me indicates that it's an open format game, because you wouldn't really play open format without Gear Turner. I can look and I can see how the matchup looks on the new cards, right? So looks like we're exactly 50-50 into Marionette right now in open format, which is good. That's a good place to be. And then you can see the impact of cards in the new decks, right? So it looks like Shelter is actually doing well in the new version of the deck, as well as Fate is doing incredibly, right? These are just like little stat differences you can see when you get a bit more granular into them. We've also got a couple other tools up here. I don't use these a ton, but Tournament Domination is if you basically can predict what a meta will look like. You can run the numbers on what you should register. So like, let's say you expect to have like 7 -IO and like 3 Bravos. you can analyze and maybe select a certain hero. So it's saying to register Jarl because Jarl has a good Bravo matchup, but a very good Dio matchup, right? It just helps you maybe help with your deck selection process in determining what you want to run. And then also we've got a similar tool where you have a sideboard helper. If you paste your exact 80 into here, Fablazing will analyze what you should run in each matchup based on the stats. So like it'll say, okay, if you have these 80, you should bring this 60 into this hero, or this 60 into a different hero, right? And then finally, we have card impact analysis. I like this. This is a new tool. I've been really liking it. So let's look at Puffin, and let's look at the win rate of, let's say, Megahertz Script, a very contentious card. It's going to go through, it analyzes the matchups, and what it can do is it can actually tell you how good a card is in specific win rates. So you'll see it's a loss overall on win rate, but if we scroll down, you can see the win rate in specific matches with or without. So there's a couple matches where it looks like it's doing pretty well in comparison to not being there. So some of the matches that I look at for Megahertz Script is like Dash.io, because null times in can be really bad, and so we might have Megahertz Script to compensate on lack of cogs if we board them out. So there's like little win rates you can look at for specific cards. You're like, oh, does Remembrance actually help with fatigue in my deck? And so you're playing like a warrior and you say, okay, what's my win rate with or without Remembrance into XYZ heroes? Is it actually helping? And is it worth including in my 80, right? This is a very important tool when you're figuring out your sideboard, is like, how actually impactful is a single card addition or a playset of XYZ in my sideboard actually going to be? Is it actually going to be helpful? Or is it better off being something else that is more impactful when it actually gets brought in? Finally, I want to talk about matchup tables and how best to look at them. So Fablazing has a matchup matrix, but also so does Fabry. I believe they're pretty much the exact same thing. Fablazing, you can pull in paper results as well, but I think Fabry is more up to date on Talishar, just based on how their stats updating works. So I would recommend, if you're going to look at specifically a matchup table, to use Fabry's matchup table. But if you're going to look at paper results, I would look exactly at Fablazing, because Fabry doesn't really do paper results. But beyond that, I want to talk about how to look at these and kind of evaluate. So this is what I mean when people say Talishar stats are fake, or oh, these aren't real stats, or whatever. So the first thing to kind of think about is games played and why games played might be high. So let's look at this most recent 30-day spread from the Fabry meta results, and let's see if we can draw some conclusions from it. So first of all, is Marionette is the #1 played deck. I don't think that's a shock. And I don't think it's a weird thing that Marionette has a good win rate while also being the #1 played deck. What you're looking for in a strong deck is when it has a high play rate combined with a high win rate. That means that not only are the people who are dedicated to the hero winning with it, but the people who are trying to test it online are also doing well with the hero, right? When you have those two things combined, you're probably on a very strong deck. And then behind that, we have two heroes that we don't really consider the top of the meta. And they have a ton of games played. And you might say, why? Well, I think one is apparent, is a new hero, right? Hala has a ton of games. I think a lot of people were excited for Hala. You know, maybe she didn't pan out as well as maybe some people were expecting. But Hala has some cool, fun play patterns, and a lot of people were testing out a bunch of variations on cards. Now, this also means that Hala's win rate is going to be much lower than just grinding a tuned deck. So Hala's currently at a 38% win rate. I would expect her win rate to slowly climb to about, I would guess, 44% win rate. It's not going to be good, but this 38 is like massively deceiving in my opinion. And we can even change to last 7 days. And let's take a look. Oh, actually, it's still pretty bad. That's okay. It just shows that maybe your assumptions aren't always right? But Hala is in a spot where people are still experimenting, and so her win rate is going to be kind of in flux. And I expect her play rate to go down and her win rate to go up. That might not end up being true. Maybe she is just that bad, but time will tell, right? And similar with Reinar, I think there's a lot of experimentation going on with Reinar right now, where Claw's left, there's a bunch of different weapon testing, people are trying meat axe, people are trying, variations on the deck list a bunch, and we have new cards coming in. So there's going to be a bunch of different decks that are being tried right now for Reinar. And so I expect it to be higher play rate than usual, but maybe a lower win rate than a dedicated Reinar player would be able to achieve. Beyond that, we've got a couple other exciting heroes who got recent tooling upgrades. So we've got the new Vincent players trying out with Deep Recesses, and we've got Bolton players trying all the new hotness with the Flurry pieces. So there's a lot of experimentation that happens on Talishar. And usually what you'll see is that the top deck in the format will have a high play rate, especially the top aggressive or easier to learn hero will almost always be the #1 representation. But then behind that is usually any deck that recently had major changes or major upgrades in their play patterns, and people trying those out as well. So Talishar has a lot of experimentation going on. So when you're looking at win rates, you've got to look at the win rate of these experimental builds with a grain of salt. These are often going to be slightly lower than what a one trick or the person who's been playing Bolton since Bolton was released versus somebody who came in when they saw, oh, we can do an Oath of Steel multi-swing without Lumina now, might fare. Behind that, we've got what I would consider pretty normalized stats for the rest of these heroes. You want to look for outliers on easy to execute, hard to play against decks. That's what I would consider some of these mid-rangey heroes to be, or fatigue slanted decks. Fatigue on Talishar is what I would consider notoriously inflated win rate, mostly because people leave. If you ever tried to practice a fatigue deck on Talishar, it is hard to finish a game sometimes. But also I think a lot of people use Talishar to practice play lines, just kind of get in the groove of it, and then when they get into a grindy slog thing where they have to pitch stack and everything, they just kind of go, I'm kind of zoned out, and they won't lock in like they might at a calling. Even if it's a very high skilled player, you don't really want to be Tuesday at 4 p.m. when you're on your work break trying to pitch deck into a Huntsman or something like that, right? So I think the grindy matchups always have a slightly higher edge on these stats, but in general, when you're looking at these, what I like to look at is massive differential win rates. So when we're looking at the Hala Victor matchup, this is a horrible matchup, right? And I think that is true. I think this matchup is nigh unplayable. Hala does not have reactions like a traditional warrior to the level to push over Victor's defenses. And so Victor just kind of gets to either block and play visits or just mid-range you. Their numbers are better than Hala's in almost every way. So I would expect this matchup to be massively unfavored, right? So these types of things are big signposts of why or why not you should register a hero. So, if we're looking at Teklevasen, so there's been some recent really strong Teklevasen runs, but this Marionette matchup is still very bad. So when you are trying to consider Teklevasen for an event, you go, okay, I can beat up on a bunch of decks, but if I'm losing to Marionette and Marionette's still at the power level that he's at, can I actually register Teklevasen in good faith? Or am I going to pair into 2 Marionette and my run might be pretty much over at that point, right? So that's that. I think I just wanted to give this deep dive to get people kind of using some of these tools. In particular, I think data is underutilized in Fab, but maybe I am mistaken on that. But I don't see people talking about these types of results based data. Instead, a lot of times it's just overall win rate, or people are talking about like just calling top eights, which, while good, like if you win a calling, you did good. But I think in general, looking at a holistic picture of either the whole calling results or like top 64, I think those are more indicative of what's a powerful hero rather than who had a successful run, because a lot of times top 8 comes down to the individual and not to the overall strength of a deck or how the meta looks in a more holistic approach. So using these, I think, between the online stats and these like top 64s and like the calling datas, you can get a really clear picture on what a deck's win rate is, what does it lose to, what tech cards should I bring in, how does this impact a matchup, and gives you a really big competitive edge going into any event, even your like locals. If you know what your locals look like, you can use that tournament predictor, make a good deck, make a clean 80 that like really targets your meta, and get a lot of advantages. So that's that. I hope you had a good time, and I'll see you in the next one.